Thank you very much, and forgive that technical blip. Let us start at the beginning, and where most visits start at the cathedral, and that is looking up at this amazing and imposing Gothic-styled building. As we approach the building and as we go up the stairs and we look at the sculptures in the top of the portals, we see that the theme of the cathedral is the creation. And that, for me, is the ultimate message of hope, of possibility. If you look at the image on the right, you will see humankind coming out of a void. True to its name, ex nihilo, we here have humankind being formed by God, basically out of nothing. In this slide, we'd like to show you two concepts for the facade of the building. The one on the left was done by then preeminent British Gothic architect, Mr. Bodley. And the one on the right was done by American architect Frohman. If you compare those two, you will see that the one on the right, done by our American architect, is a much simpler, leaner. I would say it responds to a more contemporary and a more American aesthetic. The cathedral is quite different from medieval churches, from European medieval churches that usually have portals that have depictions of the Last Judgment. In this case, we have the creation. So it is a New World perspective beckoning us to come in and to explore the possibilities. This is a bird's eye view of the cathedral. You see the facade on the west facade that we just looked at, and also the north side of the cathedral. And here you see, gives you a sense of the location of the cathedral atop Mount St. Albans. In the background, you see downtown DC at a lower elevation. No wonder when our founders of the cathedral went to this site, they could foresee that the cathedral could be a beacon of hope, inviting all people. And now Tony will describe the beginnings of the cathedral. Tony.
The Peace Cross then, 1898. Just look at that photo. Isn't that fantastic? 1898, that photo was taken. This amazing picture taken of the land where we would begin construction of the Cathedral Church of St. Peter and St. Paul in 1907. The cornerstone would be laid by President Theodore Roosevelt. Above, in this picture, this event featuring President William McKinley was celebrating the theme of peace as the Spanish-American War was nearing its conclusion. The Peace Cross now, 123 years later, with the camera facing in a similar direction, out onto what is now Washington, D.C., instead of trees, we have the campus of Mount St. Albans School for Boys. In the distance, the cupola of St. Sophia's Greek Orthodox Cathedral, and faintly, the obelisk of the Washington Monument. And now, as we follow the wall of the Bishop's Garden on the left, we encounter at the cathedral a gateway to the stories of the Bible and the United States. We can appreciate the key characteristics of Gothic architecture. Achievement of great height, 104 feet from the floor to the nave's ribbed vaulted ceiling, which could accommodate a 10-story building. The term nave refers to the large public part of the church, and it derives its name from the shape of the ceiling, which medieval architects felt resembled the upside down view of a ship's hull. The Latin term for navy is nave, and it means ship or sailing vessel. This is the view of the clerestory windows, 9 on each side of the nave. They are the largest windows in the cathedral and imbue the nave with rainbows of color. Each is the size of a 3-story townhouse. These windows capture scenes from the Old Testament, and I would like to direct your attention to one of the first clerestory windows you encounter as you look up at these magnificent stained glass windows.
This window tells the story of Noah and the ark. Here you see Noah looking up into the heavens and standing atop the ark with little animals peering out the windows. Behind Noah is a rainbow that symbolizes the covenant between God and his people, a covenant for no further destruction. The artist at the far right, you see Noah's family tending a vineyard. The artist who designed this window, Rowan LeCompte, when asked why he included a vineyard, he made reference to a chapter in Genesis that noted that this was the first crop that was planted. The artist mused later that after 7 months in the ark, people were ready for a little wine. This is the multifoil of that window, and here you can appreciate its spectacular and dynamic colors. This is one of many doves that we will see in this presentation. This dove, what it does is it signaled to Noah that the floodwaters had subsided and that the land and a chance for renewal were ahead. Noah's Ark is also captured in other media. Here we have Noah's Ark, Noah and the Ark, captured in oak, as carved in one of the benches in the cathedral choir. We can make out an ear and an elephant trunk in one of the windows, and up above in the tower we see Noah. And in the background we catch a glimpse of the west rose window, and its abstract representation of creation. Here we have, again, the story of Noah, this time in needlepoint, and it is located inside the children's chapel, which you see in the image on your right. The children's chapel was designed to the scale of a 6-year-old. On these little chairs, you have cushions, and each with needlepoint, there is a motif, an animal motif. And to the left is the needlepoint kneeler that usually sits at the foot of the altar, depicting the ark's landing. Already the animals are appreciating, partaking of the fruits of their new home, being greeted by the dove, and an elephant wanders down the landing plank. Now Tony will guide us to stories of another great leader from the Old Testament, Moses.
Moses the leader. This window always shines despite its location in the shadow of the North Tower. It represents the 3 phases of Moses' life: national leader, lawgiver, and religious leader. Moses was born into a troubled and violent time and was rescued from hiding by an Egyptian princess. His life was an example of all things humanly possible through hope, enlightenment, and leadership. The gift from God to Moses was the first law code, and it served as an inspiration to all other law codes that followed. Moses was revered by other faiths as a beloved of God. Colors and motifs from that ancient culture are captured in the warm tones of red and blue. On the far right, located in the southwest tower, is another depiction of Moses, leading the Israelites out of Egypt, designed and installed almost 50 years after the first Moses window. The most contemporary design maximizes light and is one of 22 patterned glass windows that honor people of the Hebrew Bible. This artist is one of 6 women featured in the cathedral. Moses the Lawgiver. This is the largest boss stone in the cathedral, depicting Moses holding the 10 Commandments. To the right, we look up from the ground floor of the nave. This 5-foot diameter, 5-ton stone is barely recognizable, emphasizing the size and grandeur of Gothic architecture. Boss stones lock in the ribbing that supports the ceiling. Moses and Escape to Freedom. These are images from the bronze cast doors at the west entrance, lace-like and organic forms welcoming openness, in contrast to the heavy doors typical of the cathedrals of the past. The image on the left depicts Moses and the burning bush, where God directs Moses to take his people to that land of milk and honey. On the right, Moses is using his staff to get water from a rock to quench the thirst of those fleeing from Egypt.
This artwork honors the women that nurtured Moses. In the carved oak armrest on the left, we see how Moses, thanks to the efforts of his big sister Miriam and his mother, he was saved because they put him in a basket and hid him among the bulrushes in the Nile River. To the right, the same woman stained glass artist that we saw earlier brings us a window entitled Women of the Bible. This to celebrate their unselfish service. Here we focus on the left lancet of the window that shows Pharaoh's daughter, who raised Moses as her own, discovering him in a basket. Now we jump forward in time to our founding fathers in the Americas. Tony.
Founding a dream. The legend goes, on an early spring day in 1755, Lieutenant Colonel George Washington and his commanding officer, Major General Edward Braddock, rode past the grounds of Mount St. Albans, where at Washington's suggestion, the Washington National Cathedral would one day proudly stand. The expeditionary force of British regulars and Virginia militia would face an ambush in Pennsylvania, which sparked the French and Indian War. 30 years later, George Washington would again climb Mount St. Albans, this time with a French engineering officer whose mission was to create a new capital city for our new nation. Captain Pierre-Charles L'Enfant would use the city plans of Paris as his guide. However, this dream of locating a national house of prayer was not to be realized for another 100 years. American statesman Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson holds the unique distinction of the nation's first Secretary of State, the second Vice President, and third President. He authored our Declaration of Independence and is one of our most honored founding fathers. Yet his tombstone humbly reads, President of the United States, author of the Virginia Statutes, and founder of the University of Virginia. In the close-up, we have his image and below a family attending church with the words, religious liberty. When Thomas Jefferson enshrined freedom of religion in our Constitution, he reached back into our colonial past for inspiration. We see scenes depicted in the Maryland window of the founding of the Maryland colony. The acts of toleration created a choice of faith to the colonists. Now, Protestants, Roman Catholics, and the Society of Friends began a lifestyle drastically changed from the religious strife of the mother country. Religious freedom in Maryland. Archbishop John Carroll in the Center Lancet and images of Georgetown University in the right Lancet are represented. That college was to expand over the decades, and in 1881, it achieved university status under the presidency and guidance of the first Black priest in America. Who would have imagined such wonders and achievements? And what better venue than the Washington National Cathedral to honor and represent those fruits of hope, inspiration, and enlightenment.
Our nation's founders were influenced by the ideas of the Enlightenment, individual self-determination, principles of liberty, equality, and justice. In particular, Locke's view that a ruler gains authority through the consent of the governed. Even now, we pursue the hope of making these principles true. The American Revolution and these ideals proved contagious and inspired independence movements throughout the continent. This map shows the American continent in 1794, with the United States in light green having gained independence from Britain, but yet lots of red showing the colonies of Spain, and in dark green, those of Portugal. In the window, we see the South American liberators. Bolivar at the center, below, the dove of peace with an olive branch in its beak. On the left, San Martin, below the Christ of the Andes. And on the right, Portuguese statesman, diplomat, and peacemaker, Minister Paranhos, below an image of the Virgin Mary. In this slide, we see a close-up of the lower part of that window, and it shows the flags of the countries that were independent in 1949 when the window was designed. Most of these countries had gained their independence between 1810 and 1825. And perhaps you can see the names of these countries on and recognize their flags. On the left, we have Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and then on the right, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela. And in the center, we have Bolivar riding proudly to an historic meeting with San Martin that took place in Guayaquil, Ecuador in 1822, when both men were trying to figure out if there was any hope for joining the northern and southern Spanish colonies. That dream was not to be. And now Tony will take us back in time to the 15th century and the hopes for liberation there.
Liberation after the sacrifices of war. Joan of Arc, known as the Maid of Orleans for the French county of her origin, The city of Rouen was her actual birthplace. Saint Joan led her army against a foreign occupier, freeing large portions of France where territorial holdings were disputed. By the end of the 15th century, France would be solidified. She champions the causes of patriotism as well as being a symbol of feminism. When a teenage girl can lead an army of liberation, her passion for hope and enlightenment not only broke traditions, but shattered glass ceilings. And now she's celebrated in cathedral glass. Part of this glass was shipped from England at a time when British ships were being attacked on the Atlantic. The ship carrying this glass was actually torpedoed, but managed to limp into Boston Harbor. When unpacked in the artist's studio, enclosed was a poster. England delivers the goods.
My screen has frozen, so I will need to stop and restart. And forgive us for that technical difficulty again.
Are there any questions? Maybe we should take some Q&A at this point while you restart that we could address for anyone. Just to take a little break to give us a chance to overcome technical difficulties.
Okay. Okay. And we are ready.
Thank you.
The Lady of the Lamp brings hope. Florence Nightingale. In the year 1856, with a heart filled with hope and enlightenment, this amazing woman set sail for the Crimean War, which is being fought by Great Britain and Turkey against the forces of Imperial Russia. Professional nursing was relatively new, especially in military campaigns. What she discovered upon her arrival was scandalous. She was astounded to see more British soldiers dying of disease than battle wounds. And some of the worst offenders were the surgeons. She and a group of Irish nuns began a regimen which changed forever the way hospitals and clinics were managed. Sterilization of medical procedures would become the norm and foremost rule in patient care. After returning to London, she would help found St. Thomas Hospital, and the Lady of the Lamp would remain one of history's most admired women. Alfred Lloyd Tennyson so named her, as that was how she was described by her patients.
I'm having trouble again with the screen share, so I'm going to have to stop again and start. All right.
There we go.
Okay, now we turn to an African American heroine born into slavery in Eastern Maryland around 1820. From an early age, she recalled, "I had seen their tears and sighs, and I had heard their groans, and would give every drop of blood in my veins to free them." And free slaves she did. After escaping bondage around 1850, she made 13 missions to the south and brought 70 slaves to freedom. Later, as a nurse, scout, and spy, Harriet Tubman fought in the Union Army. During the raid on Combahee Ferry in South Carolina, she worked with Union Colonel James Montgomery to free over 700 slaves. She joined the cause of women's suffrage, but peace was not long-lived, as Tony will tell us.
They shall beat their swords into plowshares. A decade after the Great War, later renamed World War I, the US Secretary of State joined the French foreign minister in Paris to hammer out a lasting formula for worldwide peace. 11 million were estimated to have perished, and a host of new countries arose, while 3 major dynasties ceased to exist. The world was much changed, and renewed hopes for a permanent peace were riding high. The biblical quote, "beating swords into plowshares," seemed a fitting phrase to illuminate this event. Our cathedral window reflects this symbolic gesture, while American soldiers are pictured passing in respectful review.
During this time, an American heroine was casting her radiance as she was speaking out against poverty, corruption, and war. At Helen Keller's memorial service, she was eulogized with the following words: "Although she was denied the light of day, Helen Keller cast more of the resilience of heaven than any person on earth." Deprived of sight and hearing, with the support of her teacher and lifelong companion, Anne Sullivan, she graduated with honors, went on to write 11 books, spoke 7 languages, and became a pioneer in promoting the rights of the disabled. On the left, we see how the fingers of countless children have experienced the Braille inscription and polished it to a brilliant radiance. Here we have another American hero who devoted his life to promoting the rights of the poor and the marginalized. This is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. preaching his last Sunday sermon at the cathedral on March 31st, 1968. His sermon was called "Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution." And here he was encouraging us to participate in a great revolution of equity and justice. In this niche statue of Dr. King, we can almost imagine him saying those often quoted lines from that speech at the cathedral, where he said, "We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And speaking of the universe, our hopes and dreams now take us beyond Earth." Tony?
A window of peace and light. Above, we see the 3 astronauts delivering a moon rock to the Bishop of Washington. Perhaps our best known representation of hope, inspiration, and enlightenment is the space window, officially known as the Scientists and Technicians window. A few years back, I was on Sunday docent duty when a nice-looking elderly gentleman in a leather flight jacket approached me with a group of friends. He said, "A long time ago, I took a very long trip. And when I returned, I brought a rock with me. That, I understand, is in this church. My name is Buzz Aldrin." I had the honor of escorting this amazing American and his companions to the window where we all admired the special tribute to our shared admiration of all things accomplished that once seemed impossible. As Americans, we started with the landing on the American Atlantic seacoast. And here we are landing on the Sea of Tranquility. Here in the Space Window Bay, these boss stones demonstrate the carving skills and story enhancements to deliver scenes pertinent to the first moon landing in 1969.
Apollo astronauts brought us a whole new perspective of our Earth. On the left, we see the 1968 photo from Apollo 8 astronaut Bill Anders that inspired so many. On the right, a needlepoint cushion with the words "A New Heaven and a New Earth" emblazoned on its side. This signaling the hope of a new era, one where the beloved community extends beyond our Earth. And our first National Youth Poet Laureate, Amanda Gorman, was also inspired. And in this line from her poem entitled Earthrise, she encourages us to keep on hoping and striving to fulfill this promise. These descending doves bring us back to Earth. This wrought iron gate was fabricated in 1932 and features the symbol of the dove to enclose the Holy Spirit Chapel. The descending dove motif echoes the descent of the Holy Spirit, bringing a spirit of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Wrought iron is a particularly challenging art medium because the artist has about 50 seconds using hammer and anvil to shape the heated iron. This enduring art form dates to the 16th century. And more doves yet again. This flock of doves reminds me of how interconnected we are, of how gracefully we can move when we move in unison. Les Colombes is composed of 2,000 origami doves by German artist Michael Pendry. Symbolizing hope, the doves present us an opportunity for renewal as we work our way out of challenging times. This art installation will be at the Cathedral this summer, and we hope that this virtual tour inspires you to come visit. Thank you.
Thank you both for this great tour. And Dora, I'm astounded at your grace under pressure with that technical difficulties. We could all handle Zoom challenges that well. Thank you. We have 2 questions so far in the Q&A. The first question is about who makes the decisions about the topics in the windows. It makes the comment that over time that has certainly changed. Do either of you feel comfortable?
Well, are you saying who decides which windows tell which stories?
Yes, or how we choose.
They were done over a series of years, starting back from the time that we first started building. And so different windows had different popularities, or they represented stories that they thought needed to be told. So it was done pretty much by committee as we moved along through the ages. So they cover, a lot of them were done during World War II. Some were done in the 50s, some in the 60s. I even saw 3 windows done while I was here as a docent. So it covers an awfully long period of time, and there are a lot of people whose feed-in is appreciated.
There is an overarching theme of iconography for the building, which is going from creation at the West End to redemption at the East End. But there's a lot of things that are covered in that nearly 1/10 of a mile distance. We have a second question about where the moon rock can be found now. Where is that lunar rock?
It can be found in our space window. And I'm told it's the only moon rock that's on display in the United States. The government owns all the moon rocks. This is the only one that's in private possession. And so you have to come here if you want to see a real moon rock.
We currently have no other open questions. Is anyone just not seeing anything in the chat, but if there's your last chance now to ask a question of our tour guides today, of our speakers today. Unusually quiet group today. Maybe they're drowned out by the cicadas. Thank you both so much for this talk. It was enlightening and inspiring for me, and I hope for everyone who joined us today. And thank you everyone who joined us today. We hope you come back. Check your inboxes for the video link and for other upcoming talks. Oops, there's still needlepoint kneelers being stitched. That's snuck in. There are replacements and repairs happening. I'm not sure if there are new kneelers. Yeah, I don't know that there are any new kneelers currently in the works.
You know, one of our kneelers in the cathedral was actually done by the Queen Mother of Great Britain. That is, Queen Elizabeth's mother sat down and needle pointed a kneeler for us. And that we keep in a very special place. But it was quite an honor for her, or for us, to have her do that.
It matches the ones in War Memorial Chapel. We have a question in the chat about the links, or the Q&A about the links that we dropped in the chat. We will be dropping those into the description of the video when it appears on YouTube. So look for them in that description. And I don't see any other additional questions. So again, thank you everyone. And thank you to our speakers today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi, and thank you everyone for listening to us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.